Introduction to Access Cavity Preparation. Hello, let's discuss another series of interesting cases today. Well, yes, these will be related to the first step in any root canal treatment, namely access cavity preparation. ACP is the means to enter, inspect, and ultimately fill the root canals, or in other words, complete the root canal treatment. One afternoon at my clinic, I saw a patient waiting for me with his hand on his right cheek. I could see that the patient was in severe pain, which, in his words, was excruciating and causing him sleepless nights. I observed deep caries in his lower back right tooth on clinical examination. To further assess the situation, I suggested an intraoral periapical radiograph since the extent of the caries involved the pulp. An immediate endodontic intervention seemed to be the need of the hour. Before beginning the procedure, I gathered my set of basic instruments. These comprised mouth mirrors, air rotor, micromotor, burrs like round carbide burr, and diamond points, endodontic spoon excavator, an endodontic explorer, DG 16, magnification aids like loupes, and a dental operating microscope. What do you think DG in DG16 stands for? Stay tuned for the answer. Coming back to the case, my next step was to inject a local nerve block to anesthetize the patient's lower right mandibular nerve. After this, I had another closer, more detailed look at the tooth by assessing the occlusal tooth anatomy. I looked for variations, such as anatomical anomalies associated with internal tooth structure, an additional cusp, abnormalities in size and shape of the tooth, just to prepare myself for any upcoming complications. As there were no complicating factors in this case, I proceeded with the access cavity preparation. Now, sometimes apart from these factors, there may be some components that can hinder the access cavity preparation, like presence of rotated or malaligned teeth, tipped or tilted teeth, grossly decayed teeth, teeth that have full coverage restorations on them, abutment teeth, and those with extensive calcifications. Well, as it may be understood, not all these components are visible to the naked eye. So, to detect them, the invisible force of endodontics, that is, radiographs, gives us an almost accurate knowledge of the root canals and their variations. Intraoral periapical radiographs are used to visualize the mesiodistal tilt of the tooth, the size and shape of the pulp chamber, the thickness of dentin over the pulp, the presence of pulp stones, variations in root canals, the extent of curvature of canals, and changes at the furcation or periradicular region. Pop quiz. Now let's go back to the case. I began with the access opening by removing the carious tooth structure while conserving the sound tooth structure. This brings us to the first and second objectives of access cavity preparation as given by Vertucci. The first objective states the removal of all carious tooth structures, and the second states conserving the sound tooth structure. It is done to avoid any recurrence of caries in the future. After removing the caries and entering the pulp chamber, I started deroofing it by removing the dentinal shoulders and any overhanging enamel structures that could lead to the misdirection of the instrument, forming ledges in the canals. Now, this is called the third objective of access cavity preparation. But why did I need to deroof the pulp chamber? I did it to get unrestricted access to the canals by better visualizing the orifices. Apart from this, I also reduced my chances of missing a canal. Let's discuss the mouse hole effect. It is commonly seen when the lateral wall of the access cavity is insufficiently extended and the pulp horn portion of the orifice remains in the wall, looking like a mouse hole. The remedy is to extend the lateral wall of the cavity, removing all intervening dentin. Now, once I completely deroofed, I could observe bleeding from the canals and the chamber. So, what did I do next? I removed the coronal pulpal tissue using an endodontic excavator and copious irrigation. This is known as the fourth objective. After removing the pulpal tissue, I followed the fifth and sixth objectives, which talk about locating all the canal orifices and forming straight line access to these canals. Now, if you recollect, when I took a radiograph, I confirmed the internal anatomy of the tooth, but along with that, I gauged approximately where the pulp chamber of the tooth would lie. I did this as per Krasner and Rankau's 9 laws of access cavity preparation. These laws help in locating the canal orifices using the CEJ or the cemento-enamel junction, the most important anatomic landmark. The first law, the law of centrality, states that the floor of the pulp chamber is always located in the center of the tooth at the level of the CEJ. Next, I had a closer look at the occlusal anatomy to ensure that the pulp chamber walls would follow the external anatomy of the tooth. I did so to follow the second law, the law of concentricity, where the walls of the pulp chamber are said to be always concentric to the external surface of the tooth at the CEJ. Thus, I began preparing the shape of the access cavity. This was swiftly done using the third law, the law of CEJ, which says that the distance from the external surface of the clinical crown to the wall of the pulp chamber is the same throughout the tooth circumference. The CEJ is the most consistent, repeatable landmark for locating the position of the pulp chamber. The fourth and fifth laws guided my next steps. The fourth law, or law of symmetry 1, states that the orifices of the canals are equidistant from a line drawn in the mesiodistal direction through the pulpal floor. The fifth law, or law of symmetry 2, states that the orifices lie perpendicular to a line drawn in the mesiodistal direction across the center of the pulpal floor, except in the maxillary molars. Since it was a lower tooth, these laws reinforced the canal location. Noticing the different shades of anatomical structures, I was reminded of the sixth law, or law of color change, which says that the color of the pulp chamber floor is always darker than the walls. Clinically, enamel is white, dentin is yellow, the floor of the pulp chamber is gray, the root canal orifice is dark gray or black, and pulp stones, if present, are pearly white. By now, I had located the orifices and prepared my access cavity. Apart from them being symmetrical, I also saw these orifices located at the junction of the chamber wall and floor, reinforcing the law of orifice location. 1. Secondly, the orifices were located at an angle in the floor wall junction, confirming the law of orifice location 2. The last law, or the law of orifice location 3, states that the canal orifices are located at the terminus of the root developmental fusion lines. The laws of orifice location help me refine my access cavity along with confirming the existing canal orifices. If these laws are followed diligently, accessing a tooth with calcifications or complicated anatomy becomes easy. Pop quiz. Apart from these laws, the champagne bubble test helps us locate canal orifices. In this test, sodium hypochlorite solution is placed within the pulp chamber after access cavity preparation. Then the bubbles frothing out from a point in the floor of the pulp chamber indicate a root canal orifice. Why do you think frothing occurs in the champagne bubble test? You got to stay tuned for the answer. There are a couple of other clinical tests to make our job easier. The white line and red line test. In a necrotic non-vital tooth, dentinal dust frequently moves into any anatomic space, like an orifice, fin, or isthmus, when using ultrasonic without water. This dust can form a white dot or line that provides a visible roadmap to locate an orifice. This is how a white line test is performed. However, in vital teeth, blood frequently emanates from an orifice, fin, or isthmus. Like dye, blood serves to map and visually aid in identifying underlying anatomy in the pulpal floor. Thus, this is the red line test. After I had located the canals to ensure a straight line access, I enlarged the orifices using Gates Glidden or rotary orifice openers. I only inserted these 2 to 3 millimeters into the canal to avoid ledging. I then reduced the tooth out of occlusion to prevent any inter-appointment fracture of the tooth. With the access cavity prepared, I now proceeded to the next step, that is, determining the working length. This will be discussed in another video. Pop quiz. Let us revise important points from today's discussion. Feel free to take a screenshot. This marks the end of the introduction to access cavity preparation. In our next video, we will discuss how it is done on individual teeth. We hope you had fun learning with us.